Welcome, Professor Sural. We have
Good morning, Shruti.
now Professor Goutam Buddha Sural.
Yes, yes. Good morning,
nice
madam.
To see you. Good morning.
Good morning, good morning.
Nice to see you in this virtual platform.
Thank you, thank you.
It's my privilege and pride to invite a dear friend and a distinguished professor to deliver the 8th distinguished lecture or the 8th lecture of the distinguished lecture series of the organized by the Department of English, Berhampur University. We welcome you, Professor Goutam Buddha Sural.
Thank you, ma'am.
This morning, Professor Sural is going to give his lecture on Dr. Faustus. All our students and participants from other places of the state and the country are eager to listen to you, sir. With this, I would like to introduce Professor Goutam Buddha Sural, who I have met a couple of times virtually and through a friend, referred through a friend, Dr. Sharpani Banerjee. Professor Sural has been very, very kind and very, very generous. He has agreed to give you people a talk at the shortest possible notice. We are obliged to you, sir.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Goutam Buddha Sural is Professor, Department of English, Bankura University. He has been teaching since 1990. He joined Bankura Christian College in 1990 in the Department of English, where he was Associate Professor and Head of the PG Department of English. He went to Bristol University in the United Kingdom in 2006 as a visiting fellow. He joined the Department of English with Vidyadhara University, West Bengal, as a professor in 2008. A year later, in 2009, he came back to his old college and continued to teach there until July 2015. He is the author of a book, Hopkins and Pre-Raphaelitism, and has edited 4 books on tribal life. He has presented papers in various conferences and seminars, and a number of his papers have been published in different national and international journals and books. His area of interest is Victorian poetry, English, Indian English literature, and tribal and Dalit literature. Thank you again, sir, Professor Sural, for having given your precious time to us. All of us are eager to listen to your erudite lecture on Dr. Faustus. Over to you, sir. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Professor Das, and I am grateful to you for giving me this opportunity. I'm grateful to the department also. And welcome, my dear students, and maybe other guests are there. Sharvani told me that she will be joining. So thanks to her also, because she acted as a liaison between your department and me. As Professor Das has mentioned, it's not going to be kind of erudite lecture or a distinguished lecture, but then definitely I have to say something, keeping in mind the students mainly, and I'm given to understand that you have read the texts, so you have a primary acquaintance with the text, because I will be quoting at times lines from the text, and for the shortage of time, and I also have some preoccupations, so what I have prepared is a written lecture that I will be presenting with the help of PPT. So without any more introductory words, I am going to present to you. It will be on the traditional line in interpreting the text with the help of critics who are traditional and who have already expressed their very well thought opinion on the text. So I'll be banking on them because I have said that it is mainly for the students to have a grip over the text. And but then one thing is very clear, that Dr. Faustus is actually a tragedy which is relevant even today, because if we talk about the morality tradition, if we talk about everyman of that time, when drama started to flourish in England, we are all everyman even today. We have our internal conflicts. We have our internal tensions. We have our aspirations. And many a time, our aspirations, they are not only not just remain unfulfilled, they at times, despite our best of efforts, despite our honest endeavors, land us up in difficulties. So with these words in mind, let us go to a reading of Dr. Faustus, and just tell me as I present whether you are able to see the slides. Just 1 minute. Can you see? Can you see? Yes, yes. Okay. Okay, thank you. So, as you can see, this is the last line of the text. Dr. Faustus, who practiced more than heavenly power permits. Now, whether this is the ultimate message that Marlowe wanted to convey can always be debated, because Marlowe's personal life was the life of a rebel, right? So let us see how the interpretation goes and how I appreciate the text with the help of criticism. The intellectual and aesthetic rebirth, known as the Renaissance, reached its peak in Italy in the early 16th century and spread new ideas throughout Europe. Renaissance prioritized the individual aspirations over collective values and encouraged people to realize their happiness and potential in this material world, rather than focusing solely on eternal happiness in afterlife. In many ways, Renaissance can be seen as a period of overachiever, of individuals who aspired for things beyond their reach. Marlowe's Dr. Faustus epitomizes this character type, aspiring something which was beyond his capability. In England, the ascension of Queen Elizabeth I to the British throne in 1558 put an end to the suffering and torment which the people of England had to go through under the rule of Mary Tudor, the Catholic queen who was persecuting the Protestant subjects. In England, the spirit of Renaissance was in full bloom during the reign of Queen Elizabeth. Elizabeth's reign not only encouraged the spirit of nationalism in England, her firm grip over the political scenario kept the country a stability and settled the religious disputes. Renaissance, coupled with Reformation, helped England thrive in all spheres of life, and the period saw an attitude of liberation in literature, science, and religion. Now, Christopher Marlowe, undoubtedly the greatest among the university wits and the most intellectually accomplished playwright of the Elizabethan age, wrote a number of tragedies before he was killed in a drunken brawl. He was not even 30 when he died, but he is justly credited with the honor of gifting the Elizabethan stage immortal tragedies that set the great tradition of Elizabethan drama. The tragic protagonists in his plays combine in them the traits of attitude of rebellion, which was a characteristic trait of their creator. Paying tribute to Marlowe, Harry Levin writes, I quote, "And Marlowe then, was he primarily for his age? Certainly he caught its intensities, blessed its rhythms, and dramatized its dilemmas as no Elizabethan writer had previously done." Sorry, there is a spelling error. "And as all would be doing thereafter to some extent." Marlowe's output was meteoric in its development and in its expression as well. Shakespeare needed maturity to express ripeness, although he could never have matured without assuming first the youthful stance that Marlowe had made permanently his own. Insofar as he must seem forever young, we are inclined to feel old as we belatedly reread him. Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, as I have already pointed out, may be regarded as a product of the twin influence of Renaissance and Reformation. His play is based on the life of John Faust, who occupies the gray area between history and myth. Marlowe is indebted to the English translation, The History of the Damnable Life and Deserved Death of Dr. John Faustus, which appeared in 1592, and this book, in its turn, was based on the German account of his life, Historia von die Johann Fausten, which was published in 1587. Interestingly, Faustus and Martin Luther lived during the same time in Germany, and as Kitty Dutt in her introduction to the play notes, these two men were the humanist influences in contemporary Germany. Talking about their influence on German society, Kitty Dutt further observes that these two men comprise two very different portraits of Renaissance individualism. According to her, while both of them challenged the suppositions of conservative society, she says, I quote, "The Protestant emphasis on freedom of conscience in belief was accompanied by a stress on secular vocation as a means of relating oneself lovingly to mankind through one's work, performed in a spirit of duty, earnestness, and industry." Thus, individualism of conviction was tempered by social concern. Renaissance individualism, on the other hand, was more extreme. Its ideal, the homo universal, that means the universal man, the man without vocation who receives freedom for self-development and self-achievement in a universal scope of strength and talents through joining the ruling powers, through annuities, or through his own exploitation of government. Now, Marlowe's protagonist is an embodiment of Renaissance individualism. A scholar extraordinaire, he feels disgusted with the limitations of human knowledge as he has realized that philosophy, law, and physics are pretty wits, and divinity is the bestest of the three. And he says, divinity, how he says? He says, divinity is the unpleasant, harsh, contemptible, and vile. He therefore decides not to read any more as he has attained the end of earthly knowledge. He chooses to bid divinity adieu and considers the metaphysics of magicians and necromantic books heavenly. Necromancy promised him a world of profit and delight, of power, of honor, of omnipotence, and mastery over the elements. He believes that a sound magician is a demigod. At this point, it is worthwhile to consider the views of the Italian philosopher Giovanni Pico della Mirandola on the practice of magic expressed in his oration on the dignity of man. That is the book, Oration on the Dignity of Man. This Renaissance philosopher struck a balance between man's aspirations and his ethical concerns. According to him, all magic is not condemnable, and he distinguishes between evil and good magic. I quote from Pico della Mirandola. He says, "The first sort is put together by the work of authorship of demons, and is a thing, as God is true, execrable and monstrous. The other sort is, when well explored, nothing but the absolute consummation of the philosophy of nature. Not only in Christian religion, but all laws, every well-ordered state condemns and curses the first. All men, all nations, studious of things heavenly and divine, approve and embrace the second." In a similar vein, Harry Levin also points out that magic was at one point of time associated with religion and lost its positive aspects. So in a similar vein, Harry Levin also points out that magic was at one point of time associated with religion and lost its positive aspects. Let me quote Levin's words. "Magic was originally the appurtenance of religion, and when religion cast it off, it subsisted in the outer darkness, along with appetites and curiosities which religion proscribed. Between magic and science, as we have more recently come to know it, the lines were not yet sharply drawn. Magicians, however, were rigorously distinguished on the basis of whether they practiced white or black magic, whether they sought to control the elements through natural philosophy and supernatural wisdom, as Prospero does in The Tempest, or whether they trafficked with the devil and conjured up the dead through witchcraft and particularly necromancy." So more or less you can find a similarity between what Pico della Mirandola says and what Harry Levin observes about magic. Now Dr. Faustus opts for the evil magic or necromancy, as despite his scholarship, he is still confined to the status of a mere man. And as Faustus himself says, "Yet art thou still but Faustus and a man. Couldst thou make men to live eternally, or being dead, raise them to life again?" The university education has proved for him a mercenary drudge. Faustus decides to meet Valdez and Cornelius, his magician friends, to teach him the art of necromancy. He ignores the imploration and warning of the good angel and resolves to finally choose magic to become conjurer laureate. Marlowe shows the vacillation of Faustus before he finally signs the contract with his own blood. But a close reading of the text shows that he is almost predetermined in his choice. Nor does he ignore the voice of the good angel. He also chooses to ignore the words of Mephistopheles. When he first appears before Faustus, he warns him of the dangers of being damned eternally if he chooses to abjure the scriptures and God. Let me go to the text. Mephistopheles says, "For when we hear one wreck the name of God, abjure the scriptures and his Savior Christ, we fly in hope to get his glorious soul. Nor will we come unless we use such means whereby he is in danger to be damned. Therefore, the shortest cut for conjuring is stoutly to abjure the Trinity and pray devoutly to the Prince of Hell." But Faustus, he has already resolved. See what his reply is, how he replies. So Faustus hath already done and holds this principle. There is no chief but only Beelzebub, to whom Faustus doth dedicate himself. This word damnation terrifies not him, for he confounds hell in Elysium. His ghost be with the old philosophers. In fact, quite in the line of a Renaissance hero, Faustus's choice is deliberate, and he refuses to be the sport of the destiny. Mephistopheles tells him, that it was Lucifer's aspiring pride and insolence for which God threw him out of heaven, and he considers himself unhappy as he lost God's grace for conspiring against him. In fact, the pleadings that Faustus listens to are, in a sense, voices of his own conflicting personality. James Smith, in his article, Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, in this connection very pertinently observes, see what he says, a large measure of the action takes place not so much between beings as within a single one of them, Faustus himself, of whom the good and the evil angel, for example, are parts. And so, I would add, are the old man, Helen, Mephistopheles, even Lucifer. In a certain sense, they are parts of Faustus. The play, in other words, is an allegory. Yet obviously, the good and the evil angel, Helen, and the rest are not merely parts of Faustus. The two angels are emissaries of powers, of representatives of orders, independent of himself, while Helen, though a shed, is more than a figment of his imagination. Significantly, to the query of Faustus as to where be hell, Mephistopheles replies, hell is where he is. Later again, he tells Faustus that hell, according to him, is the absence of heaven. It's a God-forsaken place. He goes on to say, hell hath no limits, nor is circumscribed in one self-place, but where we are is hell. And where hell is, there must we ever be. And to be short, when all the world dissolves, and every creature shall be purified, all places shall be hell, that is not heaven. We are immediately reminded of Milton's words in Paradise Lost, Book 1. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. In fact, Marlowe's Dr. Faustus is a soul's tragedy, the tragedy of a man who willfully vouchsafes that had I as many souls as there be stars, I would give them all for Mephistopheles. These are his words. Had I as many souls as there be stars, I would give them all for Mephistopheles. Nothing but unbridled ambition for power, to exercise control over the whole world. The entire drama takes place as if within the soul of Faustus. As Paul H. Kocher observes, the drama is not primarily one of external action, but of spiritual combat within the soul of man, waged according to the laws of Christian world order. Consumed with his scholarly curiosity and unquenchable desire for power and pleasure, Faustus rebels against the limits set forth by medieval theological ideas and goes on to take the catastrophic resolution of bartering his soul to the devil in exchange of a life in all voluptuousness for 24 years. Before he signs the deed of gift with his own blood, the good and bad angels appear to plead with him, one imploring him to stick to God's ways, the other tempting him to accept honor and wealth. But Faustus is resolute and resolved and moves unwaveringly to accept necromancy to exercise his control, as I said, over the entire world. Now, let me go to the lines in the text where the good and bad angel, we find they plead with Faustus. Bad angel, go forward, Faustus, in that famous art. And good angel, sweet Faustus, live that execrable art. Faustus, contrition, prayer, repentance, what of these? The good angel says, oh, they are means to bring thee unto heaven. The bad angel immediately replies, rather illusions, fruits of lunacy that make men foolish that to use them most. The good angel still says, sweet Faustus, think of heaven and heavenly things. And the bad angel retorts, no, Faustus, think of honor and of wealth. The conflict within the soul of Faustus reaches its peak as he goes to sign the contract, when he finds his blood congeal and Mephistopheles has to aid him help him by bringing fire to melt the blood. The fire here may be symbolic. It may portend Faustus' suffering in hell. We know of hellfire. We also know that fire is something which purifies. But here the connotation is definitely fire that torments, because it has the hellish association. The moment the deed is signed, Faustus profoundly uses the words of Christ on the cross. Consummatum est. It is completed. From this moment starts Faustus's degradation. When I quote James Smith, who very pertinently points out, the moment at which Faustus determines to sign, at that moment and without delay, he plunges to spiritual death. He kills his soul, which does not need 24 years to weaken or to wither. Marlowe might be said to write a play of which the hero is both alive and not alive. He appears to be working out as best he can his salvation, and in a sense he is doing so. But there is another sense in which he is working out neither his salvation nor his damnation. He is damned already. So once the contract is signed, Faustus enjoys his life, as he himself says, "My 24 years of liberty I will spend in pleasure and dalliance." During the intervening period of 24 years, he, with his magical power, is able to satisfy his curiosity. He viewed the face of heaven, of earth, and hell in 8 days. He made Pope his cunning see, but as a consequence was cursed with bell, book, and candle. He enjoyed the pleasures of rarest things and royal courts of kings. But even after all these, at the end of the day, these pleasures were not to offer him the happiness that he aspired for. These were all aided by a diabolical power, and he was aware of the outcome, that he would not be able to escape the fatal time. As Robert N. Watson points out, Faustus's early vision of glorifying the human race with a vast benevolent empire quickly fades, and instead he ends trying to please emperors with groceries and holography. He uses his magic not to turn men into gods, but instead to turn his hecklers into beasts. The ending of Dr. Faustus is often debated in the sense, if Marlowe's protagonist deserves, meaning whether Marlowe's protagonist deserves the torment and agony to which he is subjected to the end, at the end. He is a man who, even after signing the contract, is visited by good angel at least twice, is advised by the old man, and tries to repent and pray for God's clemency and grace. But never was he allowed by Mephistopheles and Lucifer to go against the contract. In fact, he was made to sign the contract again with his blood. But the wavering that he betrays after signing the deed of gift to Lucifer for the first time is not to be seen when the play opens. The great scholar of divinity at Wittenberg expresses in no uncertain terms his dissatisfaction with studies that he has mastered, and prompted by self-conceit, deliberately chooses the path of devilish exercise to govern the world. In the words of James Smith, the sin is pride, which, according to theologians, is a form and fount of all other sin. Moreover, Faustus commits it formally, that is, deliberately, without the shadow of an excuse or reason, save his will to do so. That is, it is not one of the sins committed in actual life. There were some excuse in however small a measure is always to be found. Rather, it is an abstract form from them all. Sin, it might be said in its essence. Taking this as the theme, the play is to be called not only as hitherto an allegory, but a morality. Right. So Faustus who could not escape the fetters of Lucifer, finally craves for Helen of Troy as his paramour. The last wish, which can be seen as the culmination of his sin, is, in a way, Faustus's attempt to make the best of a bad bargain. Since Faustus is incapable of enjoying God's benevolence, he makes this choice to compensate the loss. Right. Now, let's go to the text and let me refer to a few lines of Faustus's apostrophe to Helen. The famous lines. Was this the face that launched 1,000 ships and burned the topless towers of Ilium? Sweet Helen, make me immortal with a kiss. Her lips suck forth my soul. See where it flies. Come, Helen, come. Give me my soul again. Here will I dwell, for heaven is in these lips, and all is dross that is not Helena. Brighter art thou than flaming Jupiter, when he appeared to helpless Semele, more lovely than the monarch of the sky, in wanton Arethusa's azure arms, and none but thou shalt be my paramour. I skip a few lines in between. These are the lines that Faustus says. Apparently, it may appear that he is enjoying the pleasure. But ultimately, what happens? Faustus's hopes, as you can see here, they're not going to be fulfilled. It will further plunge him to the abysmal depth of his despair. He is now sin-steeped and is going to confront the harrowing of hell. In the words of Douglas Cole, see what he says. Helen, whose beauty caused Troy to burn, will do the same for Faustus. The immortality offered by the kisses of a demon lover is an eternity in hell. The soul that is sucked forth cannot be given back again. Hell, not heaven, is in these lips. The flames of Jupiter that destroyed admiring Semele are the flames of this Helena's abode, which will destroy a hapless Faustus. Wanton Faustus, like Arethusa, will hold the burning sun in his arms, but not without fiery pain. His last wish was readily fulfilled by Mephistopheles, only to confirm the moral decrepitude of Marlowe's hero. The old man's warning does not work. Faustus does not, and perhaps cannot pay heed to his advice. And when he enjoys the embrace of Helen, the old man says, "Accursed Faustus, miserable man, that from thy soul excludest the grace of heaven and fliest to the throne of his tribunal seat." Faustus cannot anymore listen to his conscience and thereby forfeits God's forgiveness. We may take note of what Nicholas Brooke observes in this regard. Faustus's sin has been carried to the point at which he must make a final choice between heaven and hell, and he makes it deliberately for hell, as the old man who watches him to make love to Helen clearly states. But they see the act in different lights. To the old man, Helen is the supreme temptation. To Faustus, she is the supreme expression of appetitive will. In choosing her, he commits his final negation of the idea of service to a god, to the whole Elizabethan conception of the proper relation of appetite to intellect of a right order. So the harrowing experience of Dr. Faustus at the end makes the reader question the choice of the Renaissance individual. It also draws our attention to the authorial intent. Faustus reveals his decision to side with devilish power, and Mephistopheles, who was at one point his closest aide, becomes at the end a bewitching friend. He cries out at Mephistopheles. Faustus says, "O thou bewitching friend, it was thy temptation. hath robbed me of eternal happiness. The didactic note is clear in the words of the good angel who says, O Faustus, if thou hadst given ear to me, innumerable joys had followed thee, but thou didst love the world. And she goes on to make a catalogue of bliss that Faustus has allowed to forego by his choice. The last soliloquy of Faustus creates in the reader a feeling of loss. In the words of V.N. Bhushan, V.N. Bhushan is one of the editors, he writes, himself the battlefield for one of the greatest mental conflicts of man, Faustus creates in us a feeling of loss and a sense of waste. What abiding wonders would he not achieved in the realms of the mind had he pursued pure scholarship and legitimate studies? Missing the honor of a mastermind, he has only the recognition of a magician. He would have been a scholar prince, but he chose to be a conjurer laureate. So in his last soliloquy, Faustus makes desperate attempts to make God hear his prayers and finally save his soul. Right. But then what actually attracts our notice is the striking contrast between what he wanted to be and ultimately where he has landed himself in by pursuing his unbridled ambitions. And that is aptly captured by Berlet Giamatti. I quote from Giamatti. She says, just 1 minute. Yes. Berlet Giamatti says, where at the outset Faustus was a creator, at the end he is a creature. If you remember, I have not quoted the lines, if you remember the last soliloquy, where at the outset Faustus was a creator, at the end he is a creature. Where before he dreamed of unlimited power and glory, now he is assured of limitless torment. The words by which he reshaped himself into a demigod at the beginning have now exploded into a horror all about him. What we see on stage are the contents of his head, the hell he will possess forever, the heaven he will shortly lose. He brought it on himself. This deformed world, when he converted, when he turned to magic from God, when he turned the power of words from God's praise to his own. Right. So he feels terrible and invoking the powers of heaven, frantically prays to stop the flow of time. At this point, it may be noted that Faustus utters a line from Ovid's Amoris, which Marlowe himself translated as, stay night and run not thus. The line has always been referred to as the powers of heaven, frantically prays to stop the flow of time. At this point, it may be noted that Faustus utters a line from Ovid's Amoris, which Marlowe himself translated as, stay night and run not thus. The line has always been referred to as he has lost contact with God, yet he prays to God to have mercy on him. His desperate cry is like that of the speaker in Gerard Manley Hopkins's poem. I am reminded of Hopkins's poem as I read the torments of Faustus. The sonnet, you might have read that, I wake and feel the fell of dark, not day. In that poem, the speaker says, and my lament is cries countless, cries like dead letters sent to dearest him that lives, alas, away. Faustus, he has deliberately chosen his path. He has abjured God, and his prayers now do not find the ears of God. So, like the speaker in Hopkins's poem, Mackenzie, N.H. Mackenzie, who is a great critic on Hopkins, he says that the speaker in Hopkins's poem suffers from spiritual hepatitis. Faustus's case is like that. It's a spiritual tragedy of his soul, and he suffers, I can say, borrowing Mackenzie's term, He suffers from a spiritual hepatitis. So Faustus's laments go in vain. See how he prays in desperation. O God, if thou wilt not have mercy on my soul, yet for Christ's sake, whose blood hath ransomed me, impose some end to my incessant pain. Let Faustus live in hell 1,000 years, 100,000, and at last be saved. At the end of the play, Marlowe seems to establish the gospel question. What shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Right. So commenting on the character of Faustus, L.C. Knight points out that Faustus's panic is partly due to Marlowe's personal understanding of religion and his failure to grasp the life-giving values. He relates Faustus to Marlowe directly. Let me quote from L.C. Knight. It is not merely that, unlike Macbeth, Faustus has no vision of the life-giving values against which he has offended. Marlowe does not grasp them either. And you have the uneasy feeling that Faustus's panic fear of hell is not only the inevitable result of a willful, self-centered denial of life, it is as though Marlowe himself felt guilt about any of his assertive drives and conceived of religion not in terms of a growth into freedom and reality, but as binding and oppressing. Right. So as I conclude yet with another observation. In his essay, A Theory of Renaissance Tragedy, Dr. Faustus, that is the title of the play, the essay, Robert N. Watson, he observes that the words in Faustus's last soliloquy are not just a Christian warning. It is much more than that, something which have their relevance even in today's technologically advanced world. I started by saying that in a sense, there is a Faustus within all of us. The promptings of the good and bad angels, our intentions, our aspirations, they oftentimes can be likened, can be paralleled to what we find in Faustus. And today it is more relevant because today we live in a technologically advanced world, scientifically advanced world. So I go to the words of Robert N. Watson. What he says is very relevant. These words are very relevant. See, this is a question warning, certainly, but more than that, it is a warning to anyone living in a world like Marlowe's or ours that invites short-sighted pride in individual status and the technological achievements of our species. A world haunted by religious uncertainties and irrational denials of mortality. The wicked temper is certainly a devil, but also possibly stands for everything that stirs our superficial egotistical appetites. All the choices we will look back on at the hour of death as individuals or perhaps as a species in nuclear war, and wonder what we have so proudly, blindly spent our souls on. Thank you. So this is my brief presentation. And
thank you very much, sir. Am I audible?
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are very much
finally audible. Okay. Finally, the computer worked. Okay. I'm so happy. This was a wonderful lecture. Thank you so much.
Actually, because of paucity of time, I could not cover areas which could have been incorporated, but because of the paucity of time, as I say, and other preoccupations, I was not in a position to incorporate.
No, I understand. I'm really grateful that you could give us this much time, which is normally, I'm really, really grateful. And now, after congratulating you for this wonderful lecture, I open the floor for questions. Participants, please ask questions.
This text is for your which semester students? Second
first semester.
First semester. Okay.
First semester.
Okay, I understand. So I'm grateful to the first semester students, because for them I have again given a reading to this text.
So there are participants from across the country. So I now request participants to please ask questions. Are there any in the chat box? If you cannot ask questions, please post them in the chat box.
Yes, Suparna has already, she has written a question in the chat box, I think. Yeah. Whether Mephistopheles is responsible for this, isn't it? And Suparna says that whether Mephistopheles can be made responsible for Faustus's doom, something like that, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. But then primarily not. My point is that primarily Mephistopheles cannot be made responsible for Faustus's doom. It was his deliberate choice, because if you see, if you relate Faustus to the Renaissance of the ground, it was his unbridled ambition, as I have mentioned. It was his overachieving ambition, which ultimately made him choose necromancy with the help of his two friends. And then Mephistopheles came to the sin. Even Mephistopheles sounded words of caution before he should finally take his decision. But Faustus was resolved, and he took his decision. So primarily it is Faustus, his responsibility, right? Yes, Anilji was asking something, isn't it?
Anil was asking something.
Sir.
Yes.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
You made a very good presentation.
Thank you.
So I have one question.
Yes.
Dr. Faustus, the drama is very much influenced on the Christian philosophy, Christian theology. Christians believe in discernment of spirits.
Yes.
How they can be aware of two impulses. The impulses coming from the good spirit and the evil spirits. And they discern, they try to find out how they are trying to capture their soul. And through their wisdom, reason, they try to find out, and they attempt to take the right decision in their life, and they go ahead. So I find this thing in Dr. Faustus. Now in every day, in our day-to-day life, we come across these kind of things. We are being influenced from the good spirit and the evil spirits.
Yes.
There are so many distractions in our locality here in Berhampur University. Students are studying. The Gopalpur beach is there in the young age. They may get distraction. How they can take the idea from this play and they can take the right decision. Can you please tell us about this discernment of spirits?
Yes, Anilji has actually related it to the contemporary problems that youngsters mainly face. So naturally, this text can be a lesson, definitely, to the youngsters, because Marlowe's intention was also that. Marlowe himself being a rebel, ultimately, he chose to convey the message through the play that if you are ambitious, there is no harm in being ambitious. If you are aspiring, there is no harm in being aspiring, in being an aspiring human being. But at the same time, your aspirations, man's aspiration, must be tempered by the traditional Christian values, because Renaissance humanism, when on the one hand it encouraged the individual aspirations, on the other hand, if we see the influence of Reformation, that definitely prompted men to adhere to the basic Christian tenets. Definitely Reformation, the Calvinist or Lutheran Reformation talked about the unnecessary intervention of intermediaries, priests, definitely so. But then at the same time, they never said that man should go unaided by his spiritual self, only listening to his material needs and aspire for things which he or she cannot achieve following an ethical track. So I think that should be a lesson for all of us, and that's why the play is relevant even today when we are in the midst of distractions. We face so many, we are in the midst of so many temptations, and there can be any moment a slip if we don't have that spiritual anchoring. We may lose track and we may suffer the fall that Faustus suffered, right?
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for that kind of a question also, because your question is my question also. There is another question in the chat box. I just missed it. What was that?
That's a simple question. What are the elements of Christian morality? I think you discussed it a little now.
Yes. This play is also a morality in an inverted sense. Often many critics point out that. But this has that structure of a morality. Yes, Faustus, that's why it is said that it is a Renaissance morality. Although that term again may be oxymoronic. How can it be a morality and yet a Renaissance play? But then I think I have discussed whatever I have said, quoting the critics. Those criticisms prove that it's a Renaissance morality. There can be a reconciliation between the two.
Professor Sural,
yes.
Would you consider Faustus to be a Renaissance hero, and how would you put him vis-a-vis the Shakespearean heroes?
Yes. Yes, Faustus is a Renaissance hero, Renaissance protagonist of Marlowe's play, definitely. But then at the same time, if we see, I think I quoted one critic where actually what you find is there was a kind of comparison between one of Shakespeare's protagonists, Macbeth, and Faustus. Now, as I said, that when we first read Faustus's first soliloquy, and then he proceeds for the agreement, the deed of gift, quote unquote, we find that right from the beginning, Faustus had no qualm of conscience, which you find in Shakespeare's Macbeth or in other heroes of Shakespeare. But Faustus, of course, after signing the deed, he continued to express till the end his vacillation, his actually the prick of the conscience that he felt from time to time. But at the same time, if we compare him with Shakespeare's heroes, I think Marlowe's hero, he is a Renaissance man, definitely. But at the same time, as I said, without the tenets of the Reformation, where one part of Reformation definitely said that you can go without any kind of religious anchoring. But then the Calvinist, as I said, and the Lutheran Reformation that always stressed this spiritual anchoring. So in Faustus, we find this kind of a kind of conflict between unbridled, uncontrolled, limitless ambition, and at the same time, his frantic efforts towards the end to walk on the ways of God. Right. So this kind of a dichotomy is there in Faustus, and that is, I think, typically Renaissance.
Thank you so much. Would you consider Faustus to be akin to the modern day heroes?
Yes, I think. I think he can be likened. There can be a parallel.
Would he be a postmodern hero or would he be a modern hero?
I'm not sure whether he can be called a postmodern hero, but definitely he is a modern hero. And we can bring in comparisons with characters like Prof, Eliot's Prof, who is a modern man, who is a modern Hamlet. Right. So I'm not sure whether he can be called a postmodern. I guess there can be.
I was often wondering, well, because he didn't want to remain within the limits of, or the prescribed limits of Christianity,
yes,
or prescribed limit. I mean, you know, even he went beyond what he should have access during the Renaissance.
yes.
So
Yes.
I sometimes wonder whether he is a postmodern hero who doesn't believe in boundaries, doesn't believe in margins.
That is
also kind of
considered from that point of view. We can definitely interpret his character as a postmodern personality. But then I think these traits are there in modern men also, where actually they want to aspire. If we take the heroes of James Joyce, there also you find the comparison here at the beginning of the play. When we read the chorus, there is the comparison with Icarus, right? So this limitless ambition that is there in modern men, in postmodern personalities, we can also find that.
Thank you. There are 2 more questions in the chat box, I think. 2, 3 more questions.
Should I open them? Yes. What are the, yes, is Dr. Faustus victim of free will or fate? No, he is not a sport of the destiny. I quote it, when I say this, I quote it from the Cambridge History of Literature. Dr. Faustus is not a sport of destiny. As you can see, all Shakespearean heroes, they are responsible for their own fate, and the Renaissance personalities. That's why they are Renaissance personalities, Renaissance heroes, because otherwise, they are in the line of, they could have been in the line of the Greek tragic heroes. They are not. So Dr. Faustus brings his own doom on himself. And then do you think that Faustus has the ability to repent? If so, why did he ignore all the urging to repent? And that's the contradiction, that's the conflict, and that's the tragedy of that great soul. Because time and again I have said that, quoting the critics, that it's a soul's tragedy. He deliberately did not choose when he first signed the contract. But after that, when he found that one after another incidents, he is moving more and more to that fatal day when ultimately he will be damned, he tried to come back, but it was too late. Every time, because he signed that contract, and Lucifer, Mephistopheles, they did not allow him to go out of it. Now, if we internalize Lucifer and Mephistopheles, then you can say that the negative promptings of Faustus, they won over the positive promptings, right? So Mephistopheles and Lucifer, they are also like the good and bad angels. They are the bad angels, and then Faustus internalized them, and he paid heed to the temptations of pleasure. Ultimately, he could not repent. It was, again, his choice. And then Shukan, I think, is there any second question by Shukan? Should our passion or hunger for knowledge be always guided by theological beliefs? Not necessarily, not necessarily. I think you can always be guided by secular morality. Morality, ethics, they are not necessarily theological, but some kind of ethics we have to have in our life, isn't it? And then you say that does being over-ambitious always lead to damnation, as in no. Yes, over-ambition, I think centuries after centuries pass, and writers, literatures, scientists, they always warn us against over-ambition. Ambition is good, but uncanny ambition, which was the cause for Macbeth's doom, Macbeth's failure, that is definitely not good, right? We have to look before we live. So we have to be absolutely confident about our own capacities, our own capabilities. But then we should not try to achieve something which is beyond our capacity. Yes, you can go on, extend the emergence of your capacity, acquiring knowledge, acquiring skills, but then there is a limit to every human being. We have to keep in mind our limitations, right? In Dr. Faustus's damnation tragic or an act of justice. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy. Marlowe's treatment of Faustus, yes, it transformed Faustus's character into the character of a tragic hero. The text from which he borrowed, there it is said that deserved death. Now, if a death is deserved, the damnation of Faustus and the deserved death, if the death is deserved, then it is an act of justice, definitely. But what do you call, in case of Macbeth? Is Macbeth a tragic hero? Or is he a victim of justice? If Macbeth is a tragic hero, Marlowe's Faustus is also a tragic hero, definitely. He is damned. Definitely, he is tried. That is the sin. He wanted to achieve control over the universe, over the world. In fact, universe, you can say, because he makes a visit of the planets also. But at the same time, he had that qualm of conscience, which made him feel for 24 years that he was not following the right track, and ultimately he will have to suffer. And he suffered. He suffered a fall. And then Ramhuri asks, what's the present relevance of Dr. Faustus in the context of globalization? Yes, we have to be very, very careful, because globalization means a lot of temptations. Globalization, and along with globalization, capitalism. We have to keep these things in mind. And we have to take lessons from play like Dr. Faustus, that how far we should move with globalization, how far we should share the tenets of globalization. Obviously, we have to use our own filters. Otherwise, these can land us up in trouble, definitely. And going beyond the limit, does it have any significance? Yes, definitely. Is anyone among us capable of going beyond the limit? I pose a counter question. It's not possible, actually. We have limitations, but what we should do is we should always try to achieve the maximum possible staying within the limitations, right? We are limited not always because of ourselves. The limitations are can be for many reasons, and that can open up a different front of debate. So I don't want to do that. But then we have to definitely try to overcome our limitations. But then there is a limitation of overcoming the limitations. We have to keep that in mind, right? Can you say power affect the lives of Macbeth and Dr. Faustus? Yes, definitely. Power affects, definitely affects, because this play is a play about domination. This play is about power, and Macbeth and Dr. Faustus both hankered after power, both ran after power, and ultimately failed, because there is, again, if I borrow your words, a limitation, right? So,
do you think that the Taliban are going to suffer the plight of Dr. Faustus?
It's very controversial over the net to say something, but then if you profess that we are in God's ways and practically you drift away, then I think...
No, I'm talking from, I mean, I'm not trying to be controversial or anything. From the point of view of a literary scientist, right? We are all literary scientists. So from all that we have read, we have seen in the past, do you think that, because, they were hankering for too much of power and now they have the power with them, but will they know how to handle it? Because I think Dr. Faustus's problem was that he could not handle the power.
Yes.
He could not handle the power, and hence that he failed and he suffered because there was no repentance. Even Taliban doesn't have any repentance.
Yes, yes. Actually, in case of Dr. Faustus, I think all of us agree that initially his choice was deliberate, because he was not satisfied with the kind of university education that he received. He was, as I said, a scholar extraordinaire, and he could have achieved many things. So, as V.H. Bhushan says, that he could have been a scholar prince. Instead, he ended up by becoming a conjurer, a conjurer laureate, as he himself says. So this is, I think, the tragedy of Dr. Faustus. And in case of people who are rulers across the world, I think this can be a lesson. I do not know whether the political leaders, they read, how many of them they go for reading of such texts, I do not know, but they should at times fall back upon these texts, read them, and draw lessons, because they are timeless. Right. So
may I make some points here?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Professor, for such a nice introduction. So I think
may I intervene? Dr. Bharabhadra Tripathi is my senior colleague in our department.
Yes, namaskar.
So, from my reading of Dr. Faustus, I would like to make a couple of observations here. I think the most attractive portion of the drama is the interaction between Dr. Faustus and Mephistopheles.
Yes.
Mephistopheles somehow acted like his conscience keeper, even if he's a devil. So we call him a good devil. But there are some good devils too. So that is to be seen. And Mephistopheles tells that when there is an interaction, Dr. Faustus is asking, where is hell? Mephistopheles tells, hell is not circumscribed. It has no circumference.
Exactly.
Hell can be everywhere. So hell is not a geographical area, it is a concept. That is what he wants to make him clear. So that is enough an indication, a kind of moral lesson that how hell and heaven lie within us.
Yes.
A moral battle that Marlowe talks about in the drama, and that is made clear by Mephistopheles in his conversation with Faustus. That is something our students have to take a note of that.
Exactly.
Relate that to the present time, to present politics, to present situation, whatever. To the present individual success and failure, to the moral dilemma within us. So it is a kind of universal concept that
Right.
And one more point I want to make. I think I have come across different criticisms that Dr. Faustus is not properly developed as a drama. There may be a beginning, there may be an end, but there is not much of a middle in the drama. So the concept of units is not properly justified in case of Dr. How do you find it, sir? Do you agree with it?
Yes, I agree, because this has been a controversy for long, that whether Dr. Faustus really has a middle, and it has a weak middle, definitely. But then I think there is a purpose in the sense that the kind of sins, they are at times very light, even versical at times, but they offer a kind of criticism of the Catholic religion, because Reformation was against the orthodox attitude of the Catholics, and the sins were actually Faustus plays on hope. they are a kind of those are often the reflection of Marlowe's own attitude towards faculty. So that is again, I think,
especially I hope especially this scene with the Pope and all that, the Vatican, snatching of the face and disrespecting the Pope. That may be some purpose, some anti-papal.
Yes. That is there. That is there.
Well, I have often thought that Dr. Faustus could be the precursor of absurd drama.
Yes, that can also be said, because taking in the middle into account, you can say that.
Yeah, that is what I have thought. So there are some more questions in the chat box. So if you could take that.
Good afternoon, sir. Is Dr. Faustus a time period stated in the date specifically 24 years? Yes. Now, it could have been 24 hours, because it could have been 20. It is 24 years, definitely. And if you ask me, honestly, I have not specifically thought about the time span, but then if going by common sense, if we interpret it, I think that is what Faustus thinks a considerable time to enjoy the world, a considerable time to enjoy the pleasures for which he was aspiring. There may be other interpretations. I have not come across such interpretations, but this is something, a very thought-provoking question. Why is the time period stated in the date specifically 24 years? I invite answers from participants who are here, if you can answer this.
Participants, anyone?
Now, 24 is 12 into 2, and Christ has 12 apostles. In this way, you can relate it, but I am not sure how to actually relate this and how to interpret this time frame. There is another question: how can we explain? Dr. Ota is asking, how can we explain that? Yes, I think we have discussed this. The character of Dr. Faustus in the context of Renaissance humanism. He is an epitome of that. Dr. Faustus, definitely, his character is an epitome of Renaissance humanism. But definitely, the dangers of Renaissance humanism is also reflected to the character of Dr. Faustus, because he shuns God's ways. He shuns ethical ways. If I say that God's ways, that again may be controversial, but then you have to have, people have to have. And that was actually a caution sounded by Luther, sounded by Calvin, that you have to have some ethical considerations, because Renaissance humanism, if it says that prosper, aspire for anything at the cost of public good, at the cost of collective good, that is not the positive aspect of Renaissance humanism, which Faustus wanted to achieve. He wanted to have pleasures at the cost of society, at the cost of collective interest. So that is the wrong side of Renaissance humanism which he wanted to practice, right? Otherwise, definitely Dr. Faustus's character can be looked at as a representation of Renaissance humanism, no doubt about it. And tragic conflicts in the plays Hamlet, Macbeth, Dr. Faustus, yes, they are there, definitely. What is said, is hamartia a personal error in a protagonist's personality? Yes, definitely. In a way, hamartia is definitely the tragic flaw in a protagonist's personality, no doubt about it. Okay, how can Dr. Faustus be viewed as a tragedy based on the conflict between intention and methods? Okay, just one compulsion is there. I can go on discussing, but then I have to rejoin through my telephone because my daughter has examination. She needs the computer, I think.
Right. It's okay. I mean, thank you so much. You have been with us for more than 1.5 hours. So thank you so much. Rise to you, sir. And on behalf of Berhampur University and the Department of English, I will request my colleague, Dr. T. Ishwar Rao, to propose a formal vote of thanks.
Okay, thank you, madam. Esteemed head of the department, Dr. Suti Das, respected Balabandhu Tripathi sir and Anil Kumar Priya, and my dear students, scholars, participants. It is my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on behalf of the PG Department of English, Berhampur University, Banjavihar, Ganjam, Orissa, on the occasion of 8th lecture in the distinguished lecture series by Goutam Sural, Professor, Department of English, Bankura University, West Bengal. Today, Professor Goutam Sural explained Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, the man who practiced more than heavenly power pyramids, very well. It was really informative and insightful because the session threw light on many scholarly dimensions regarding the subject matter. The question answer session following the presentation was very well, very interesting and rewarding, particularly from the point of view of the students, scholars all over India. I thank everyone for their valuable time and enthusiastic participation in making today's session fruitful. Last but not the least, I would like to thank my head of the department, Dr. Suti Das, madam, for giving me this opportunity to propose vote of thanks. Thank you all. Have a nice time to act.
Thank you from my side, and a very warm namaskar to all of you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day, Goutam. Stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you.
And sometime we hope to see you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Anilji. Thank you, Balbhadraji. And thank you, Mr. Rao, Professor Rao. Thank you. And thanks to all my students there. Right.
Thank you.
So, thank you. I take your leave now.
All right. So we hope to see you someday physically here, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes, I'm looking forward to that. Definitely.